Dear students, welcome to the consumer behavior class. So this is our fourth week in row, and we are discussing the details of consumer behavior. So as you will remember, last week we started to discuss the internal influences in the last 2 weeks. So we first look at the perception concept, and then last week we discussed the learning process. So we understood how learning occurs and what is important in learning process, and how marketers use the theories, the learning theories, to get an advantage of the process. So last week we discussed the learning part. Today we are going to continue with the memory part. So learning and memory will be accomplished today when we will finalize our discussion about the memory side. And next week we will go on with motivation. So today we will see the memory side. What is memory, how it works, how it functions, and how marketers use memory process to attract the attention of brands, of people, consumers, or companies. Now, before going on into the details of the memory, actually, I would like to inform you about being a consumer. So how we become consumers. Of course, when we are babies, we start to consume the things, especially food, etc. But however, we are not rational, right? We are not conscious about what we are doing. So this is why we need to pass over some process which is called the consumer socialization process, which means that we learn how to become a consumer, and our consumer personality, consumer characteristics are created based on our experiences. So every person, every individual has some type of consumer characteristics, consumer personality. So every person has different tastes, preferences, wants, needs, right? So these are shaped in the process of consumer socialization. So as consumers, as we grow up and become older and older, first we are babies, then children, then teenagers, then young people, till we become to the young ages, we learn how to become a consumer. This process is influenced by generally four types of factors. These are, first of all, the parents' influence on us. Second, the let's say the baby sitters. I mean, let's say the first experiences. Third, the cognitive development process, and the fourth one is, of course, our understanding of messages. So these four important, let's say, four important um, factors shape our future consumer characteristics or consumer personality. Parents' influence, the influence of media, the cognitive development, and the message comprehension. So the electric babysitters means that this is the media, internet, etc. We call it electric babysitters. They are not babysitters actually, but they are electronic babysitters like internet, etc., or other media like YouTube. So these four are the main four factors which uh, affect our consumer characteristics and shape our consumer personality, what we like, what we don't like, etc. The first one is parents' influence. Parents influence us. This is for sure. So how they influence us is related with how to say in three ways. The first way is that they just deliberately push us to to consume the goods that they want us to consume. So this is why they are trying to push us, to affect us, to prefer the things that they like to do. So as a consumer, so they trying to create the copies of themselves because they think that that is the right way of consumption. That brand should be consumed. We should get rid of that brand. We should always buy this product. The product is used in this way, etc. So they are trying to impose what they know and what they know as a right way. So this is the first way they try to affect us. This is the first way. So this is the first way which our consumer culture or consumer characteristics or consumer, let's say, consumer personality is shaped with the parents' influence. The second way that parents influence us is generally through the media, right? So generally, parents try to control and manage our interaction with our outside world. So in this way, they try to limit what we are watching as a children, what we are seeing, and what we are exposed to. So this is why it is very important that an indirect way of shaping our consumer personality by the parents is through the managing of our interaction, controlling our interaction with the outside world, generally through media like television, internet, etc. So this is in this way they try to control the stimuli, the exposure we have from outside world, advertisement, products, or brands. So this is their second tool, controlling our interaction with the outside environment. The third way that they influence our consumer culture or personality is to just make us to observe them. So when we observe them, our parents, we learn from their consumption behavior and we inhibit this so it becomes our norm, our culture also as consumers. So if we always see our parents consuming a particular brand, we get used to that brand and we keep using that brand also. Or if we see our brands, let's say, consumption in a particular way, uh, so we learn how they consume a particular product, then we also learn how to do that and we implement that. This is also another way. So the second source or factor which affect our consumer personality in the future or consumer socialization process is the media, electric babysitters. So we are talking about the media. So media is very effective. What we watch in the childhood directly affects us. This is for sure. This is why it is very also important to understand, let's say, it is also very important to understand what our children is watching. And this is why parents try to control. So generally, research studies show that generally when children, for example, this is a research made in England, UK, when children watch some advertisements related to food products, those children who watch this are consuming higher amount of food compared to those children who did not watch these advertisements. So exposure to some kind of commercial messages in the childhood directly affects the children and changes their behavior. So this is why media is an important factor in shaping our future consumer personality and consumer socialization process. The third factor is our cognitive development process. So generally, we have three development stages in terms of cognitive information processing capability. So the ability to store and retrieve information depends on the age we are. So if we are younger than 6, our capability to comprehend and understand the message, the real intent, etc., is very limited. So children under age 6 have very limited information processing capability. So this is why we are different in terms of ability to store and retrieve information and understand what is said to us. When we are between 6 and 12 years, then if somebody helps us to understand what's going on, then we can comprehend and understand, even store this information. But on the other hand, children who are older than 12, they become more strategic. So they can understand the message, they can process the information, and they can decide consciously and rationally to some advertisement, to some product consumptions. So rational product consumption does not exist under age 6. Between age 6 and 12, some part of information processing capability can be provided with the help, and they can understand what's going on. But after age 12, the children become a little bit more real consumer and understand the messages. So this is why it is very important that generally children consumers, they do not really understand the commercial intent behind advertisements, and they believe what is said as it is. This is why it is very, let's say, they can be easily manipulated by the companies compared to adults. So very related with this cognitive development, message comprehension is also very important. As I told you, children before 6 years, 7 years old cannot really understand the real intent behind the commercials, and they are really vulnerable to commercial messages and intentions. This is why they are easily change their preference of food, and they are just deciding with their sensory inputs, which means what they see, what they hear, and what they smell. This is all from their side. So this is the case with children. Now we discussed the four factors which affect the consumer socialization process, right? The first one was related with the family interactions, the family effect. The second one was the media. The third one is the cognitive development, and the fourth one is their, let's say, memory and understanding of their messages. So there are four factors which affect this consumer socialization process. But whatever when we talk about adults or grown-up consumers, then we are talking about a more rational process of information processing. So this is why generally consumers, grown-up consumers, have the eligibility and capability to process the information and record it to their memories. So in this respect, we should understand what is memory, how it works, and what is relation with the marketing, how marketing people can use the process of memory to get an advantage in their communications. So this is the main topic of approach that we are going to analyze. So let's define the memory first. Memory is a process. It's a process of getting information from outside world and keeping it in our brain memory, and then taking out or calling back when we need it. So it is a process. It's like a computer information processing capability. What the computer is doing, the computer is getting the information from outside world. For example, we are writing something. Then what the computer does, it stores the information in the hard disk or SSD. Then when we call it, it brings to us back this information. The memory is almost the same process. We acquire the information, we store it for further usage and later usage, and then when we need it, we call back this information and use it. This is the how memory uses. So there's an input of data, the process of data, and output of data. This is the simple way of explaining the memory. Of course, what marketers are standing at this point, where do the marketers stand at this point? Of course, they stand in a point where marketers try to be written into the memory of the consumer. So marketers try consumers to remember them continuously. This is the main objective and main ultimate goal of marketing in terms of only memory. So first of all, in order to be the preference of the customer, you should be first in the memory of the customer. This is for sure. So simply, the memory process can be analyzed as I explained, in three simple steps: input of the data, processing of the data, and output of the data. More scientifically, we can input the data into our memory when we can understand the coming information, and we can recognize. This is why this is called the encoding stage. Encoding stage involves the understanding of the incoming information and recognizing it. So if the information is understandable by us and we can recognize what type of information is that, then the encoding stage is completed. So, for example, when we see an advertisement of the product, if we can understanding what type of product is that, what is its category, what is its benefits, then we can encode this information. So it is ready to be handled in the data processing part. So in the data processing, we store the information in our memory for further use. So it's like a warehouse of information. So the memory can be defined as the warehouse of information. And finally, there is a retrieval stage. In the retrieval stage, when we need this information about the product, for example, we call back this information from our memory to understand or to compare the optional products, etc. So this is the case. So another important issue is that we can define at least three types of memories in general terms. These three types are sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. So what is the difference between them? We will see them. Sensory memory is related with senses. Short-term memory and long-term memory is about the duration of keeping the information in our mind. So let's start with the sensory memory. What does it mean by sensory memory? So first of all, sensory memory stores the information which is coming from our senses. When we hear something, for example, this goes first to our sensory memory. Our ears listen to the sound, and this is written to our sensory memory. So a nice jingle, a nice music of a brand or company in the advertisement goes through our sensory memory for further processing, right? So, say, or like a smell, for example. If we smell something, this goes to our sensory memory as the smell of something. So, this sensory memory is a very short-term memory, very short-term memory. So, the storage of this information that we receive, the stimuli that we receive through sensory, through sensors, our senses, the sensory memory do not last long. It is just 2-3 seconds mostly. So, for example, when we walk down on the street and we are passing through, let's say, a restaurant, and there is a very nice smell of food, right? So we smell it. This smell goes to the sensory memory. If we keep evaluating this smell, then it goes to the short-term memory. But first, we need to further process this information. We need to think about it. If we don't take into consideration this smell and go keep walking, and then we will forget it. So sensory memory is very short, but when it is connected, when it is evaluated by the consumer more and more, so when we when we start to let's say when the when this stimuli like smell or light or let's say music sound uh, just passes through our let's say thresholds or filters, then it is transferred to the short-term memory. In order to pass these stimulus through our senses, through our thresholds, we need to really pay attention to this. For example, if we hear something and if we pay attention to this, then yes, it passes to the short-term memory. So this is the same for the smell. If when we smell something on the in front of the restaurant, if we start to think about what type of smell is that, if we pay attention to that, then it passes from sensory memory to the short-term memory. Then the short-term memory is a place, or let's say a small warehouse, which we store information for a limited period of time, and it has no unlimited capacity. Our short-term memory is like the random access memory of computers. So, as you will remember, RAMs of computers or random access memories of computers are keeping the records of what actually we are doing at that moment in order to speed up the things in the computer. But when we finish the work, then they are just deleted by the computer. So our short-term memory works like the random access memory (RAM) of the computers. So it only keeps the information which we are getting at that moment, and a little bit uh, longer time than the sensory memory. Then of course, if we are processing this information further in the short-term memory, and we are trying to elaborate the information, then it goes to another stage, which is the long-term memory. But before going to the long-term memory, in the short-term memory, we are chunking this information. What does it mean, chunking? When we will receive and encode the information, like knowing its category, what is the purpose of this information, or stimuli, stimulus, and we understand what is incoming, then we connect this with which is already in our memory. So this is called the chunking approach. Okay, so chunking is related with combining small pieces of information into larger ones, and we use chunk information, grouped information, for creating some meaning for this. This is chunking. So in the short-term memory, we chunk the incoming information with other related information to create an overall meaning of this information. Then, if we really elaborate this short-term memory information more and more, and we spend some mental effort on this information or stimulus, then it is transferred to the long-term memory. So if we really elaborate and spend some effort, mental effort to think about it, then this becomes a meaningful long-term memory input for us, and we are just relating this to other information in the brain. This is how long-term memory items are actually generated. So this is very important, and of course, do not forget, if we really don't pay too much attention to the information coming, or to the stimulus that we are exposed, then there is no way for the stimulus to be transferred to the long-term memory. So in order to pass from sensory memory to the short-term memory, the stimulus should be attracting our attention. In order to pass from short-term memory to the long-term memory, the stimulus should be elaborated more by us. So we need to think about it. We need to deal with it. We will pay attention, and we will focus and provide consume some mental effort to think about this stimulus. This is how the long-term memory is formed, and the stimulus is transferred from short-term memory to the long-term memory. So here we see how all this process works. Our sensory memory has really capacity to store some sensory information like smell, sight, sound, touch, feeling, etc. So this sensory information is kept on the sensory memory only a couple of seconds. If we process further, or if this sensory information attracts our attention and let's say breaks our threshold, or in terms of attracting the attention, then this is let's say if it passes through our attention gate, then it goes to the short-term memory. In the short-term memory, we have a limited capacity. We cannot keep too much information in our short-term memory. It's not like long-term memory. This is why in the short-term memory, what we are doing, we are just dealing with the inputs, information, or stimulus which we are dealing at that moment. And we decide whether to forget it or to further process to the long-term memory. In order to pass this information from short-term memory to the long-term memory, there is a need for elaborative rehearsal process, which means that the information which we are dealing with should be deep processed to, and will pass to the long-term memory. So what does it mean, deep processing? When we be exposed to a stimulus, then in that case, our short-term memory decides, depending on our, of course, approach, decides to whether to forget this or to go on with this information. So if really we start to make a process to further process this information, think about it, then it will, this process is called deep processing, and it brings the information from short-term memory to the long-term memory. An example, for example, if I see a price information, this is a visual information. When I go to the store, let's say that I go to the shoe store and I see one pairs of shoe with a price tag, right? No problem. So when I read the price tag, when I see the price tag, it's a sight sense, because I'm seeing it, sight. So it records this price tag and the price information recorded to my essential memory, right? And if attracts my attention because it may be an interesting price, then I keep it in my short memory. For example, 100 Turkish lira. Then, if this is enough interesting for me to further evaluate this price, then I start to think about the prices of other shoes, similar shoes in the market, in other stores. And I compare this 100 Turkish lira price with the prices of other shoes that I see. So this is where deep processing takes place. So further I evaluate the price, further I think about this price, I keep deep processing this information, and then what happens? Then it is transferred to my long-term memory. Then I remember this 100 Turkish lira price of that store, of that pair of shoes in that store for a long term, because I learn it and I memorize it through transferring it to long-term memory. When it goes to the long-term memory, this 100 Turkish lira, it becomes associated with other information in our memory. So all information which we acquire from short-term memory are recorded into an associative network. And in a typical associated network, all the information are connected to each other. For example, let's think about I saw a perfume, then it attracted my attention. I recorded it to the short-term memory, and I further analyzed the perfume, smelled it, checked the price. I processed this information enough to trigger a deep processing, and then it recorded to the long-term memory. In this case, this long-term memory, this item, this, let's say it's a cologne, cologne, and I recorded this into the perfumes category, the perfumes associated network, and then it is recorded there, and everything is clear up. So This is why it is very important to understand how the consumers will perceive and how the consumers will transfer our brand or products in which associative network. This is why in our advertisements, our first aim is to connect, let's say, connect the brand product to the consumer by attracting his attention. So he will start to record it to the short-term memory and make him think about our product or brand through our message in the advertisement. This is the second aim. Then, when he elaborates more, he will transfer this information to his long-term memory. And in order to go to the real associative network in the long-term memory, we need a right encoding process. In order to have a right encoding process to make consumer understand the product benefits, product category, why it is used, and in order to place it in the right associative network in the mind, we need to also communicate with the consumer the right information required to be placed in the right associative network in the memory. So if we are a perfume brand, we need to really communicate the right benefits, the right product information, the right package design to be categorized under the perfume's associative network. And what does this associative network used for? Consumers, when they try to call back this information, they benefit from this associative network. And for example, if as a brand we are associated with being young or elegant, then in this associative network, we need to choose in which items we should be, let's say, connected with. Why? Because it may bring an advantage to us. For example, if our target customers are young people, our perfume brand should make them feel like young, right? So this is why we need to connect our brand in this associative network as a young. So in our advertisement, we need to give the message of being young when you use this perfume. So this is why it will go in the associated network with young. It will link itself, our brand, with the young information. So this is how associated networks are working. So, for example, young is a meaning concept, right? And for example, quality is another meaning concept. So these are recorded as individual notes in the mind, in the memory. Okay, they are stored as individual notes in the memory. However, when we really go into the details, this when we try to give a message to the customer, we can combine several notes together to give a message and to create a schema. So I will talk about what's schema now, but before that, I will just give you an example. For example, we want our, let's say, perfume or deodorant to give the message that it is made for men, especially macho men, okay, tough men, let's say, okay. So what we are going to do, we will combine different meanings to create a proposition or belief in the mind of the consumer. So we will combine cologne. This is a meaning, right? Or let's say deodorant, for example. Okay, so deodorant is a meaning. The second meaning is a man. The third meaning is a macho. So as a brand in our advertisement, if we communicate these three meanings together, they will create a proposition for our brand. And if we say Axe is cologne for macho man or is deodorant for macho man, then Meaning 1, meaning 2, and meaning 3 will come together and will create a more meaningful proposition. This is called proposition. So when different propositions come together and integrated, we create a schema. A schema is like a procedure. So schema shows a behavioral mode, code of conduct. So every schema is a procedure of consumer behavior. So by just combining these propositions, we just create some schema which guides us in our consumption settings. So one schema is a dentist, for example. Dentist is a schema. It is composed of different propositions: doctor, health, medicine, uh, doctor's office, nurse, etc. Health, etc. Teeth, etc. Clean teeth, etc. There are different propositions which come together and create the schema of dentist. And when we have the schema of dentist, we create in our memory a script which is related with this schema. A script tells us how to make a consumption or how to behave in the consumption setting. So, for example, a script of service from dentist is the following. Go to the dentist, read magazines or look at your mobile phone in the waiting room, then go sit to dentist's chair and dentist starts the operation. This is the 4 steps in the script, and under the dentist schema in our memory, it is already a script there, and we just call back this information and do the necessary. Now, of course, when we record everything in our long-term memory and store it for future uses, sometimes there are some instances where the need to retrieve this information. So we call back this information in order to benefit from this information. So in this process, for example, if we go to the same store, or if we go to the another shoe store, for example, we need to remember the price of the store in the previous store, right? Previous store price of the shoe in the previous store. So what we call back, what we do, we call back this information, the price information, and remember it, right? So this is the retrieving of memory. So retrieval is the process of calling back the information, recovering the information from the long-term memory, like remembering the price of the shoe. So, of course, the easiness, how is easy to retrieve this information depends on the some factors. There are some factors which affect the remembering of brands or advertisement messages or product information. What are these? What are these factors? First of all, we have the pioneering brand in the market. The first brand introduced in the market is always be remembered much more than the followers. This is the result of the research. So this is why pioneering brand effect is very important. So those brands who are the pioneers in the market, they are the first ones entering to the market. They are always remembered more easily. Spacing effect. If we make an advertisement, for example, if we keep repeating the advertising for 1 week or many times, it is not so effective in terms of remembering by the customers, because really there is a studies which they really let's say they really think about they really make some research about the spacing effect, and it is proved that when some advertisement is seen over repeated times, over and over again, for a longer time, it is really more effective. So the most effective way of, let's say, affecting the memory and the callback is not to repeat very frequently in a limited time, but repeating the advertising for longer periods in a consistent way. This is the much more effective way. So spacing effect and continuity effect is very important. The fourth one is the ad structure effect. So in this ad structure effect, the structure of the advertisement is extremely important. In which way? If we use some interactive tools in our advertisement, eye-catching tools in our advertising, they are more easily transferred to the long-term memory and they are more easily remembered. This is very important. The fifth one is the state dependency effect. So this is a theory that, and it is true, I believe, the state dependency effect tells us that in cases where the advertisement is seen, if we, for example, if we are in a good mood and in an environment where we see the advertisement, if it is repeated, the same environment is repeated, then you will call back the brand more easily. So generating the same environmental conditions of the moment which we saw first time the advertisement or the brand or the product will help us to retrieve this information more easily compared to the environments which are not really consistent with the first environment that we saw our product or service. So this is state dependency effect. Of course, we always remember familiar effects much more easily than unfamiliar brands. So when we see a familiar brand or when we think about brands, familiar brands are much more easily remembered by us. This is the case. And the form restore effect, it is very interesting. So form restore effect tells us that if the initial advertisement provides a novelty, a shocking item, or a very innovative one, then it is much more easily remembered compared to regular ones. So as the advertisement or communication or the product is novel and attracts the attention in terms of novelty, or it really shocks the consumer by just, let's say, providing a special, let's say, a wow effect, then it is much more easily remembered than the regular ones. This is on restore effect and based on research. And emotional effect, of course. So when people really see an advertisement and when they see this advertisement, when they are having fun and they like what they are watching, for example, it is much more easily remembered. This is why brands and companies try to impose emotional effect to the advertisements to trigger some emotions like joy, bright, sadness, or happiness, etc. This is very important. So emotional effect also tries to create somehow the effect of memorability of the item and retrieval of information performance. So how we are measuring the power of memory, the power of our brand in the memory of the consumers. There are two ways: recognition and recall tests. So recognition and recall tests are two different tests. Recognition tests try to understand whether the consumer recognized the brand or product or the advertisement. In order to do that, we are actually showing the brand, logo, advertisement, etc. to the consumer and asking them whether they are remembering, or whether they are not remembering this product, brand, or let's say the advertisement. If the consumer says that yes, I really let's say remember this one, then it is said that the brand or the product or the advertisement is remembered. About the recall test is a difficult one and is the more powerful one. So in this recall test, when the consumer asks about thinking of some products in one product category, or is asked whether he watched an advertisement related to that product category without mentioning the name of the brand or the company, then if the consumer really remembers, calls back the name of the products in that category as our brand name, or remembers the advertisement, then we can say that the consumer recalls the brand. So recall test is a difficult one because it's not aided. This is very important. It's not aided. And if a brand passes through the recall tests, it's a very strong brand in terms of memory power, and it is good. Generally, recall tests are extremely important, or recall performance of the brand or product is extremely important in cases where the customer makes a decision of purchase without going to the store or before going to the store. So in order to be preferred by the customer, you need to be remembered, recalled by the customer. This is why in product categories where the customer decides to buy something before going to the store or before making a research, the recall performance of the brand is extremely important. On the other hand, if the customer goes to the store to purchase something, I mean, the decision making, the purchase decision is made in the store, then recognition power or performance is enough. Recognition performance helps us to show ourselves to the customer, and the customer will recognize us when they see our product package or, let's say, posters in the store. So if the customer makes a decision inside the store, then we have to make sure that the customer recognizes us. Knows us. So this is why in that type of product categories and context, recognition performance of the brand is extremely important. Yes, dear students. So these are all information related to the memory. There are other types of memories besides essential memory or short-term memory or long-term memory. For example, we have episodic memory. It is the memory which we create based on our personal experiences. But in any case, generally, the main memory types are categorized into these three memory types, and we discussed all of them in detail. So today we looked at the memory concept and memory types. So we completed the learning theories and the memory process. So this was another internal influencer of consumer behavior, how they learn and how they process this information in the memory. and how all these learning processes and memory process is used by the consumers. This is all for today. Do you have any questions? Good question. Good question. Are we going to do face-to-face or online? Dear students, till now, as far as I know, we will go online with my classes, but it may change. I will let you know if it will be face to face. Okay, I will send you a message from OIS if it will be on face to face starting from next week. But for my classes, I believe, because it's a very large class, it will be online always. And of course, in these conditions, it is not preferable to go to the school, of course. So let's see. If I don't send you any messages from OIS or Blackboard or Learn, this means that we will do online. But if we will go face to face, then I will inform you this week. Okay? Thank you. Thank you and see you, dear students. Thank you very much. See you. Bye bye.